Hello friends, welcome to Buried Truths, where the dust of time is swept away and history's deepest secrets rise to the surface. Let's view the video. In the shadows of medieval warfare, one name struck fear and awe across Europe: the Black Prince. Known for his unmatched skill, brutal campaigns, and chivalric image, Edward of Woodstock carved his legacy in blood and honor. This is the untold story of England's deadliest medieval warrior, a prince born for war. Born on June 15, 1330 in Woodstock Palace, Edward was the eldest son of King Edward III and Queen Philippa of Hainaut. From birth, he was destined for greatness, groomed not just as a royal heir, but as a battlefield commander who would shape England's military future in the 100 Years' War. Unlike other princes of his time, Edward received military training from an early age. His father instilled in him a fierce sense of duty, courage, and knightly honor. By age 7, Edward was already mastering the sword, lance, and tactics of war under the most seasoned captains of England. In 1343, at the age of 13, Edward was named Prince of Wales. The title brought with it great responsibility, and the young prince did not disappoint. Instead of living in courtly luxury, he prepared for battle, readying himself to lead English forces into the brutal campaigns that would define his legacy. Edward's education was not limited to warfare. He was also deeply trained in court, politics, diplomacy, and royal governance. This combination of intellect and military prowess made him a dangerous figure, not just to England's enemies, but also to any rivals at court. His rise was both strategic and relentless. The young prince quickly gained admiration across England. His chivalric image, golden armor, and unwavering loyalty to his father made him a hero to many. But beneath the noble exterior was a ruthless tactician who would stop at nothing to secure English dominance on the battlefield. By the age of 16, Edward stood at the precipice of history. His first taste of war would come at the infamous Battle of Crecy. But before that blood-soaked field, the boy who would become the Black Prince was already feared as a warrior king in waiting. At just 16, Edward of Woodstock faced his first true trial by fire, the Battle of Crécy in 1346. It was here, on a muddy French field, that the boy prince transformed into a feared warrior. Against overwhelming odds, his courage and leadership earned him eternal glory in England's military legend. The English army, led by King Edward III, had invaded France during the early phase of the 100 Years' War. Edward, given command of a major division, was tasked with a crucial role despite his youth. This bold decision would test not only the prince's mettle, but also the future of English arms. The French, led by King Philip VI, outnumbered the English by at least 2-1. Their heavily armed cavalry and Genoese crossbowmen marched with pride. But Edward's forces had something stronger: discipline, defensive strategy, and the deadly longbow, a weapon that would redefine European warfare for decades. As the battle began, the Black Prince stood at the center of chaos. Rain fell, mud thickened, and arrows darkened the sky. Yet Edward held firm, rallying his troops. Refusing to ask his father for help, he proved his valor by holding his position against waves of brutal French assaults. The English archers decimated the Genoese, and the French cavalry, charging blindly, fell into disarray. Edward, in the thick of combat, displayed tactical brilliance far beyond his years. His courage and command turned the tide of the battle, earning the respect of hardened veterans around him. When the dust settled, over 10,000 French soldiers lay dead, including dozens of nobles. The English had won an overwhelming victory. King Edward III proudly declared that his son had earned his spurs. For the first time, the world saw the making of a military legend, the Black Prince. This triumph marked more than a personal victory. It was a pivotal moment in the 100 Years' War. The Black Prince's emergence at Crécy showed that England now had a young, brilliant leader who could challenge and defeat Europe's most powerful kings. The legend had only just begun. After the victory at Crécy, The Black Prince's legend only grew darker. No longer just a noble warrior, he became a terrifying symbol of English wrath. His campaigns through France, known as chevauchées, were marked by speed, brutality, and total destruction. To the French, he was not a hero, but a nightmare. By 1355, Edward was leading his own army through southern France. His mission was simple: devastate the countryside, cripple the French economy, and provoke their armies into open battle. Villages were torched, crops burned, and towns looted. These raids were not just strategy, they were terror used as a weapon. Edward moved fast and struck without mercy. Riding deep into French territory, his army covered hundreds of miles with astonishing speed. His men looted cities like Carcassonne and Narbonne, leaving behind nothing but ashes. Civilians fled at the sound of hooves, terrified of the black banners that preceded him. Though brutal, the campaign was also calculated. Edward aimed to break the will of the French nobility by forcing them to defend scorched lands. French knights avoided direct conflict, knowing they couldn't match Edward's experienced, disciplined forces. This frustrated the Black Prince, who craved battle and the glory it brought. Yet behind the destruction was a deeply chivalric figure. Edward spared churches, protected high-ranking captives, and upheld certain knightly codes. He was both ruthless and refined, burning towns by day and dining with nobles by night. This duality made him admired in England and feared across the Channel. The chevauchée of 1355 resulted in no major battles, but its impact was devastating. It shattered the morale of the French peasantry and nobility alike. Edward had shown he could march wherever he pleased, undefeated and unstoppable. His reputation as the scourge of France was now carved in fire. This phase of his career proved the Black Prince was more than a battlefield prodigy. He was a master of psychological warfare, blending honor with horror. To the English, he was a lionheart. To the French, a shadow that turned daylight into dread. The year was 1356, and France braced for another storm. Edward, the Black Prince, marched north with an army of 6,000, daring the vastly larger French force to confront him. What followed outside the town of Poitiers would not only be a military masterpiece, it would shake the very throne of France. Edward's forces were outnumbered more than 2-1. King John II of France led over 14,000 men, including heavy cavalry and elite knights. Edward, refusing to retreat, prepared his troops with precision. He chose his battleground carefully. Defensive terrain, hedges and slopes would be his allies once again. The prince's army formed in a tight, defensive line. Longbowmen stood ready behind natural barriers, while dismounted knights awaited the French charge. On the morning of September 19th, the French advanced with confidence. But like at Crécy, they underestimated the English bow, discipline, and the cunning of a young commander. As volleys of arrows tore through French ranks, chaos erupted. King John's repeated charges faltered against the English defense. Edward then unleashed a flanking maneuver that struck the French rear, collapsing their lines. The French king, surrounded and cut off, was captured after a desperate stand with his son, Philip. Edward treated King John with chivalrous respect. He dined with him the night of his capture and allowed him honorable imprisonment. The image of the Black Prince, armored, victorious, yet courteous to a fallen king, fascinated Europe. He was feared, but also revered as the ideal knight. The Battle of Poitiers was catastrophic for France. Not only had they lost thousands of knights, but their king was now a prisoner in English hands. Morale plummeted. France spiraled into political chaos. Edward had done the unthinkable, defeated, and captured a reigning monarch in open battle. This moment cemented the Black Prince's place in history. He was no longer just a warrior prince. He was the hammer of kings. His tactical genius, bravery, and personal code of honor elevated him beyond legend. Poitiers was not just a battle. It was Edward's greatest triumph. Victory had crowned the Black Prince as Europe's greatest warrior, but power came with a cost. In 1367, Edward answered the call of Pedro the Cruel of Castile, seeking to reclaim his throne from the usurper Henry of Trastamara. What began as another noble campaign would spiral into tragedy and ruin. Edward led an army into Spain, confident of swift victory. Backed by English knights and Gascon allies, he marched through the Pyrenees. At Nájera, he crushed Henry's forces in a textbook display of tactics. Pedro was restored to the throne, but the glory masked a deeper decay beginning within Edward himself. The victory came at a brutal price. Edward's army suffered heavy losses, and the campaign left him deeply in debt. Worse, Pedro refused to repay Edward's war expenses. Disillusioned and weakened, Edward returned to Aquitaine a changed man. His reputation remained, but the cracks beneath the surface widened. Now, ruling Aquitaine as a prince in his own right, Edward faced rebellion from local lords. He imposed harsh taxes to pay off his debts. Once beloved, he became known for cruelty and greed. Gone was the chivalrous knight, replaced by a sick, angry ruler struggling to hold power. His health began to fail. Some say he contracted dysentery in Spain, which grew worse over time. Once the embodiment of vigor and youth, Edward now aged rapidly. His physical pain mirrored the political turmoil brewing across Aquitaine. The people who once cheered him now cursed his name. By 1370, his forces besieged the rebellious town of Limoges. When it fell, Edward ordered a massacre. Thousands were slain, including civilians. Whether he ordered it directly or not, the Black Prince's name was forever stained. His glory had curdled into darkness, and his enemies rejoiced. The Castilian campaign marked the turning point in Edward's life. From that moment on, the Black Prince would battle not just his foes, but his own failing body and shattered legacy. The man who once captured kings now struggled to hold on to his fading honor. The final chapter of the Black Prince's life was not written on the battlefield, but in the shadows of illness and fading power. Once the brightest star of English chivalry, Edward of Woodstock now faced a battle he could not win. Disease, grief, and political turmoil marked his last years. By 1371, Edward was too ill to govern Aquitaine. He returned to England with his wife Joan and their young son, Richard. Pale, weakened, and carried on a litter, he was a ghost of the warrior who had once terrified France. His body withered, but his name still inspired awe. Back home, England was no longer the realm he had fought for. His father, Edward III, was aging and frail. Corruption festered in court, and political factions vied for influence. Though the prince tried to uphold order, he was too sick to wield real power. He could only watch decline unfold. In 1376, at age 45, Edward knew the end was near. He summoned his final strength to secure the succession of his son Richard, ensuring the Plantagenet line would endure. Days later, he died at Westminster Palace. England mourned deeply for a warrior, a prince, and a hope that died with him. His funeral was grand. Thousands lined the streets as his coffin passed by. He was buried in Canterbury Cathedral, under a black canopy, dressed in full armor. Above him his epitaph read, "Here lies the Black Prince, once a mighty knight." It became a shrine to medieval heroism. Edward never became king, yet his legacy endured far beyond his death. His son would ascend as Richard II. His campaigns shaped the course of the 100 Years' War. Poets, chroniclers, and soldiers remembered him as the last true knight, a man of valor, fire, and honor. The Black Prince remains one of England's most captivating historical figures. Though he died young and left behind a war-torn legacy, his legend lived on. He was a warrior of contradictions, ruthless and noble, feared and adored. In the echoes of medieval history, his name still rides, eternal. If you're passionate about uncovering the forgotten stories of our past, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Don't forget to like the video if you're enjoying the journey so far. And stay tuned because there's so much more history waiting to be unearthed, right here on Buried Truths.